to the Influence Factory podcast. This program is dedicated to support professionals who have a desire to develop their digital business influence so they can navigate through a fast-paced, constantly growing digital world. We invite newcomers as well as our family of business influencers to a place to play, share ideas, questions, tips, and guidance with other thought leaders around the globe. Sit back and enjoy our program with our host Dean Delisle as he interviews guests. News and commentary is provided by Kate Hassett and Jackson Delisle. Power Move lessons are provided by the Influencer Marketing Department at Social Jack. And production, editing, and distribution is provided by the Social Jack production team.
All right. I'd like to introduce my good friend, Brian Jenkins, and he's the Director of Communications for Business Block, a firm that advises corporate executives and leaders of organizations on financial and information technologies. He's been in finance for over a decade now, and first as a personal financial advisor and as an investment banker. And in the previous decade, he traveled the country producing informational videos for corporations, foundations, and government agencies. And for 16 years, from 82 to 98, Brian was a correspondent and anchor for CNN based in LA, then Tokyo, and finally New York. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dean. Glad to be with you.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny, every time we get together, it's always like, you have so many stories. I almost don't know sometimes where to ask or talk about, but I'm going to bring up a couple of fun facts that I think that are cool, because some of these, on this program, we talk about how people progress with their lives, and then that turns into careers. And you were, when you started at CNN, you were 24, and you were the youngest full-time correspondent to ever serve the network. And the network was still new at that point. So what was that like?
Well, many of us were plucked out of smaller markets around the country. Ted Turner, in creating CNN in 1980, when it debuted, tore apart the old career development system. I likened television news to professional baseball, where you had single A teams, double A, triple A. Triple A teams in television news were the local stations in big markets like Chicago, New York, LA, and then the networks were the major leagues. Well, Ted created something completely different, and he staffed it with people who were veterans of the other networks, but also a lot of young people from around the country. And the gentleman in charge of hiring correspondents was from Bartlesville, Oklahoma, had been a news director in Oklahoma City at one point, and he recruited a lot of young people from Oklahoma, including me. I was the number 2 anchor at the number 1 station in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the ABC station. My Saturday evening newscast that I anchored came on after Fantasy Island, and we had the number 1 rated newscast in the entire market on Saturday evenings. So at a very young age, I found myself to be a celebrity in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I was a big fish in a medium-sized pond, and was asked if I'd be interested in a position with CNN in LA. At the time, it was still considered chicken noodle news or cup of noodle news, add hot water and stir. Within the industry, people felt that it may not last. But I thought, hey, it's LA. I saw myself going east first instead of west, but I thought this could be a stepping stone to a big 3 station in Los Angeles at the end of a contract. Big 3, I mean ABC, CBS, NBC. So they flew me out to Hollywood. I went to the bureau. They offered me a job on the spot. I accepted. Really didn't even negotiate the salary. 3 weeks later, I'm living in Hollywood Hills. So
Wow.
For a kid from Iowa, it was exciting to be going to California. I grew up wanting to be a beach boy and a surfer.
Yeah,
and here was my chance.
That was hot at the time, that music. That's what I was trying to think. What were the top tunes during that time,
Well, in the early 80s, gosh, I remember driving into Hollywood to the sounds of Africa by Toto.
Right.
And but when I was very young, the Beach Boys were hot, and the Beatles, of course. But it was fun to be in LA and to see all the places that I'd seen in TV shows and movies. So it was an interesting time. CNN was still not well known. many people in Southern California would say, CNN, is that Christian broadcasting? And I'd say, no, it's Ted Turner. Oh, yeah, Ted Turner. We know him, the mouth of the South.
Yeah, right.
Well, slowly but surely, CNN gained acceptance. And I went to Tokyo in 1986. I had asked for a position there in 1984. And 2 years later, they said, we need you there now. So I went over, had a tremendous run of news in LA and then in the Far East. And CNN gained more and more recognition. And because CNN was shown on Armed Forces TV in the Far East, particularly Japan and Korea.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had more exposure in South Korea than the other American networks. And so I was able to get interviews with political figures that the other networks couldn't because they knew CNN. And even though I was quite a bit younger than most of the other network correspondents, I had that kind of access. One story I love to tell, I heard that an ABC crew was out in Seoul one day and someone came up and said, ABC, what's that? And they said, American Broadcasting Company. And they said, oh, CNN. So American was CNN to those people. So I was able to get interviews with political dissident leaders that the other networks couldn't get. And so it gave me an advantage. They had a huge advantage in the number of camera crews and producers and staff that they had there, especially during the summer of rioting in 1987. But I managed to, with my 2 camera crews and no producers, keep pace and exceed them in some ways, which brought me attention from the other networks at that point. But so as far as I know, I am still the youngest correspondent CNN has ever hired full-time.
Wow. And, one thing, it's interesting. I remember I had left Merrill Lynch in the early 80s, and I want to say it was maybe the mid 80s when all of a sudden I got to New York and I was staying with my buddy in Jersey, and all of a sudden I look on his TV and he's got the sort of the headline news thing on, and I go, what is this? These are just like snippets of stories. And I go, this is brilliant, because I have a short attention span and I like anything. I always say I read, I love social media, because when I was growing up, I didn't read books. I read magazine articles. So to me, this was like the snippet. And then if I decided I wanted more, I could flip to this was pre-internet, if you will, for the news.
Sure.
So then I'm like, wow, I can really dig into whatever I want at this point.
And one of my colleagues in Tulsa at the ABC station was one of the first to jump to CNN. It was called CNN2 originally, then it became Headline News. And she jumped a year before I went to LA. Again, they were recruiting a lot of young people, and some of those folks are still active in the business. And some of my colleagues at CNN are still there, not many, but some are. But once the internet came around, people were able to get their news from the internet. And now with smartphones, people get news alerts. So you'll notice that CNN Headline News, they changed the name to HLN.
Right.
And I think recently they changed it back, but I believe from 3:00 Central in the afternoon on, they show repeat episodes of Forensic Files. And my wife is sort of hooked on that, and I get easily hooked with the opening 10 seconds of each show, but there's less and less news on Headline News, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so just real quick, and then we're going to transition here, but you covered some of the most amazing news stories of our time, because whenever I go through this with you, it's like time travel, because it takes me back to those moments. I mean, you've covered earthquakes, the Gulf War, hurricanes, the World Trade Center, the standoff down in Texas in Waco. And so what was that like? I mean, is there anything that stands out, one over the other, that you're just like, oh my gosh, because they were all significant history points,
Yes, I was tremendously lucky. I had a tremendous 16-year run with CNN. I covered many of the most historic events of the 80s and 90s. Name a topic, I probably covered it. I figure I filed at least 5,000 reports over my 16 years with CNN, some on the same topic, and I would cover criminal trials for a lengthy period of time or some other stories. I would have to say my top experience was reporting live from Kuwait City hours before the Allied forces actually rolled into the city. We arrived with a crew of 30 people in the CNN group at 11:30 in the evening. The city was blacked out. The Iraqis had knocked out the power stations before they left. So it was very eerie. You had these white apartment high-rises, sort of ghostly in the night. There was an orange glow on one horizon. It turned out those were the oil field fires. We didn't know that. I thought there was some kind of skirmish or battle going on, but it was the oil field fires. And so we arrived at 11:30 at night. We later called ourselves the Dirty 30 because we weren't able to take showers for 2 weeks. We didn't have any hot water because the Iraqis, again, had knocked out the power. So we got there at 11:30 at night. We drove around. I remember seeing somebody had spray painted on concrete guardrails along the expressway, Free Kuwait, Bush did it, I love CNN. So we knew they had been watching us for 7 months as they were occupied by these brutal Iraqis. Wow. And so we set up, and as our engineers set up our huge satellite dish, in those days it was quite big, and they had to pack it in pieces in suitcases and then pull it out and put it all together. While they were doing that, I used a satellite phone with a small metal umbrella to make our first audio report. So I went live at 1:30 in the morning. I was the first correspondent for CNN reporting from the city and the second reporter in the world to go live from Kuwait City. Wow. And then at dawn, the caravan of Allied forces led by Kuwaitis, then Saudis, and then others from the Persian Gulf rolled in, a few American special forces with them, but the Americans tried to keep a low profile and let the Persian Gulf states get the bulk of the credit. And so they rolled in, and people came out of their homes to celebrate and dance around us, and the women were ululating. I won't even attempt to replicate that, but I have a photo of myself with my helmet on, and I'd taken out my contact lenses, so I had these big tortoiseshell eyeglass frames that were stylish in those days, and people are dancing around me. So I filed our first report out of Kuwait City that day. So I would have to say that's big. Covering Tiananmen Square 2 years before that was a big event. And I did cover all manner of disasters, the San Francisco earthquake, Hurricane Andrew in Florida. I covered the bombing of the World Trade Center. I was the first reporter to go national with that from a payphone across the street from
That's
the
what I was
World
going to
Trade
ask.
Center.
You were on the ground in the dust, right? And
Yes. So this is not to be confused with 9/11. This was the bombing of the underground garage at the Trade Center in 1993. I was actually at federal court in Lower Manhattan waiting for a ruling in a case by a group of gay and lesbian Irish folks who wanted to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade, and ultimately the court approved that. But as we were waiting, our pagers went off. We didn't have cell phones in 1993. So I called in to our desk and they said, hey, there's been an explosion underneath the World Trade Center. And I thought, oh, it's probably another old gas pipe in New York that's blown up. So I walked over there. It was only a few blocks over. And as I came into view, I looked up and I saw black smoke coming out a few windows in the upper north tower. And people were streaming out of the doors at ground level. And I thought, this is not a steam pipe explosion or a gas pipe explosion. And there was an open payphone across the street. I dialed into Atlanta. They patched me into the control room and I went live immediately. I later learned that because most of the nearly all the local stations in New York had their transmission tower on the top of one of the Trade Center buildings, and power was knocked out, they all lost power. So all the local stations went dark. My wife was scheduled to anchor on New York One, the all news cable channel, that evening. She went onto the anchor desk at 4 p.m., and I don't believe she was allowed to leave until 1:15 a.m. So 9 hours straight without a potty break, anchoring the coverage. And because New York One was the only local station on the air that day, everybody was watching New York One, and she got a lot of job offers after that and some major awards. But I was on the ground covering it for CNN. So I was the first reporter nationally to let the world know that something had blown up under the Trade Center.
Wow, that has got to be crazy. Now, and your wife is still in the news media on WGN in Chicago, right?
Yes, she is. She's a morning reporter Tuesdays through Fridays, so she's out covering all manner of incidents. She covers a lot of shootings in Chicago, of course, court cases, whatever's the top story of the day. She's usually there. Bad weather, but also some fun stories, including opening day of the baseball season, that sort of thing. Right. But yeah, she's still going strong. And she's very active on social media. She was named Social Media Person of the Year in Chicago in 2013. She hates for me to mention that because she thinks there are other people who are more influential, and she's not the only one to use social media. But she was really one of the first people nationally to embrace Twitter. She was having Twitter conversations with Shaquille O'Neal and Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore early on, and was being invited to Twitter parties. And because she was in news, she was invited to speak on panels in Chicago and Las Vegas, and really embraced that at a time when a lot of TV reporters were resistant, and many still are resistant to using social media. They feel they're not compensated for the time they put into that. She embraced it, and she's built a huge following. She has nearly 500,000 followers on Facebook, for instance, right. And she uses Facebook Live frequently prior to going on the air with her live reports on WGN.
That's wild. Now you're in a different space. You're no longer reporting, but I know you do a lot of speaking and things like that. You've transitioned to the world of blockchain, which,
yes.
I've been in technology my whole life, and I have a lot of friends like you in blockchain because we run into each other at the conference.
Yes.
I speak on the social media part about it, but and I still find it fascinating. And for those listeners that don't understand blockchain, and then we'll get into your story, just give us a snapshot definition, like what the heck is blockchain?
I find it useful to use analogies and metaphors. So I tell people, think of a paper ledger book. Think of Ebenezer Scrooge in A Christmas Carol with his quill pen scratching entries into a paper ledger book. That was the technology of the time. Later, someone invented the typewriter. Then we later had electronic record keeping. Blockchain is the next stage in the evolution of record keeping and information. So I say to people, think of a block as a page in a ledger book. But everybody participating in a certain group, they call it an ecosystem, can see what's going on the page. They can see what's going digitally. So you have all these computers participating, whether it's a public blockchain or a private blockchain. All the computers see what's going on to the ledger page in real time. Once that page is full, it is sealed with a digital code. And again, it's not a paper page. It exists in cyberspace. But once that page is sealed, that's called a block. Then you start a new page, and that is sealed when it's full, and that's a block, and that creates the blockchain. So you have to picture in your mind the blocks in a chain. You can't physically see it,
Right.
But there are illustrations that show it that way. So that's what I say. So the advantages of blockchain are that everybody can see what's going on at the same time. Once the page or block is sealed, it cannot be messed with. Nobody can theoretically break into it and change the information. So it's immutable. So the blockchain can provide a single source of truth for those participating. So the participants don't have to go through a central authority, a bank or a government or some other keeper of the records to get information. They can all see it at the same time. Blockchain was created to record the buying and selling of Bitcoin.
Oh, that's right.
So this was in 2008. By 2012, 13, people started to see that blockchain could be used for many other purposes besides the buying and selling of cryptocurrency. And so our team focuses on blockchain for enterprise, blockchain to be used in all sorts of industries, the insurance industry, health records, finance, manufacturing, really you name it now, blockchain is going to be used. The city of Chicago has been looking to create ID cards for each citizen, and that information would go on the blockchain. We're working with government officials on using blockchain to create a registry of weapons, so to facilitate gun registration. So again, it's a way to allow everybody participating to see what's on the record. And somebody gave me a good analogy last year that if you think about what we're doing right now, everybody who's watching this gets to see it at the same time. So we're creating a live blockchain. If somebody's recording it, now they can go back and try to edit that. But then somebody else can say, well, here's the full uncut version, and we can see where you made an edit. So live reporting on television or on the internet, a webinar, is a form of video blockchain. Everybody can see it, and it can't be altered without somebody saying, wait a minute, you messed with that.
Right, right.
So it provides a lot of uses, but the challenges are, first, privacy and security, and getting people to participate. We can get in more, if you want to, into some of the current uses of blockchain and why they're having difficulty getting participants in those.
That's what I was going to ask, because I just did a segment with NBC on influencer privacy, security, as it relates to social media.
Mm-hmm.
You know that there's been a lot of breach in the banking systems and social media and accounts and hacking and things like that. Are you saying that blockchain is still hasn't figured out the secure access of it, or will it make it more secure?
Theoretically, it will be more secure because everybody can see it. It's open. And those who are true believers in blockchain see a world where we can eliminate corruption because information cannot be messed with. But one of the challenges is to make sure that the information going into a page or a block is clean and not dirty information or bad data, because once it's on there and the page is sealed and turned into a block, it's very difficult to go back and change it. And especially as the chain forms, if it 10 blocks into the change, you want to go back and change something in the first block. That's very difficult. So there are many people who dismiss blockchain as unworkable. My feeling is because it offers the promise of tremendously greater efficiency in the flow of information and cost effectiveness, that people will be working on improving it. It'll happen step by step. As with any technology, you can look at most any major technology in our lives and see that it didn't start. The first airplane was not a 747.
Right.
It was the Wright brothers' little rickety biplane. The first automobile had an engine probably with the power of a modern day lawnmower. Right. So, and our phones, the first flip phone could not do nearly what our current phones do.
I remember my bag phone. I think it was $2,000 that I paid for it. It was $1,000.
Big clinker.
Yeah,
Yes.
$1,000 a month. And you know what? I like the idea of it being authentic because I used to be in data and data security and doing bank audits. And so what we would do is look for patterns of, breaking a pattern or patterns that were out of whack or out of sequence, things like that. It seems like this is very secure in that way that it's going to keep those medical records from being tampered with and banking records from being tampered with. Do I have that correct?
Yes, again, in theory, but hackers are always trying to stay one step ahead of the security experts, and it will take vigilance. And we tell our clients we are not coming in to propose a one-size-fits-all blockchain, a prefabricated blockchain. Blockchain may not even be the appropriate technology for a particular problem that a company or organization has with its flow of information. There may be existing technologies that are a better solution. So we are not out there pushing blockchain as the be-all and end-all. And there are tremendous complications. I went a couple of months ago to a demonstration by a blockchain architect for Oracle on a pilot project that they're doing with, I think, 6 companies. And he went through it step by step. I thought, oh my, as a non-technical person, I'm not going to understand this. To my surprise, I realized I've learned enough about blockchain and technology that I was following.
Right.
And I saw how complicated it is and all the hurdles that they have to overcome to make this workable. In the question and answer session afterwards, I said to the architect, it seems to me that things are going to get a lot more complicated before they get easy. But again, that's true of any technology, and it takes time to develop. I point out to people the wireless radio was invented by Marconi in the year 1900. We did not have a commercial radio station in this country until 1920 when KDKA in Pittsburgh went on the air. David Sarnoff, at the age of 24, invented television in 1928. We didn't have a commercial TV station until 1948. You think about how
wasn't it Procter and Gamble that sort of broke that open back?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It was soap, right? I think, soap. Yeah, the soap story. So,
but technology is advancing at a much faster pace now, and who knows where we're going to be in 5 years. I believe, and many people believe, that blockchain will be incorporated into so many areas that we will be using blockchain on a daily basis, but 99.9% of us won't even know it. It has to be seamless and organic, just like the intuitive nature of smartphones. Steve Jobs said, dummies need to be able to use this. We can't make it complicated. We have to make it obvious so people can catch on and use it right away, or they're going to get frustrated and put it aside.
Yeah, right. And I'm a tech savvy guy, and sometimes I still feel like a dummy when I'm going through my smartphone. So
yes. Well, you're way ahead of me.
Yeah, there you go. But so for the people that are listening in our audience, a lot of people make transitions, and you made a massive transition from CNN news reporting to blockchain technology. And in that, you have a financial advisory and services background for that 10-year sprint. Tell us a little bit about the shift or the transition that took place, and maybe some of the people that helped you along the way.
I left CNN in 1998 at the age of 40. My son was 8 years old. My daughter was 18 months old. I felt I didn't need to prove to myself any further that I could look death in the eye and survive. I figured my kids needed a father more than the world needed another TV correspondent, and I didn't want to miss out on their childhood. So I left CNN. I started my own video production company, which allowed me to take on assignments on my own schedule. I did a lot of coaching of my kids' sports teams over the next 10 years until they retired me and went on to play travel sports. They got tired of the old man yelling at them from the sidelines.
Same here.
Yeah. And I said, well, even if I'm no longer your coach, I'll still be yelling at you. I just won't be your coach. But so in 2009, a friend invited me to look at his financial company, AXA Advisors. My father had become a stockbroker and commodities trader at the age of 39 in 1964. So I essentially grew up in a stock brokerage office. I spent a lot of time helping my dad clean up, and I learned some things by osmosis and some things that he taught me. I always felt that I would be nervous being responsible for other people's money, and that was one reason I didn't go into the field. And it was actually my dad who suggested that I go into television news because I'd gotten the lead part in a school play when I was in the 11th grade, and he was afraid I'd caught the acting bug and would be forever calling home from Hollywood looking for money, starving actor. So he said, a steady paycheck is a good thing. Why don't you combine your interest in performing with your academic strong suit in writing and go into television news?
Wow.
And I was one of those oddball kids who actually watched all the newscasts. I knew all the network anchors and reporters, and had this yearning to go overseas as an adult and see the world. And my dad said, why don't you go see the world on somebody else's nickel? And that turned out to be Ted Turner. But so when I had this invitation to look at the financial firm, I thought, oh my gosh, my dad had passed away 16 years earlier. And I thought, I'm following the old man's footsteps after all. And I think he's up there in heaven laughing at me, because now I'll know what it's like to deal with financial clients. But I really enjoyed it. I got my licenses and was an advisor for 5 years. And then I was recruited away by a gentleman I had met from Chicago who had opened an introducing brokerage in Shanghai to connect Chinese investors to the U.S. markets. And I essentially did marketing for him. We did video interviews here in Chicago, which I posted on a Chinese blog site. And we got a lot of good response for that. But then I was recruited away by the new investment banking division of Zacks Investment Research, the second biggest equity research firm in the U.S. after Morningstar. And I did that for a while. And then in the summer of 2017, my friend George Vukotic, who had created a financial technology incubator called FinTank, like Shark Tank on TV, said, hey, we've had so big a turnout at our free evening seminars on blockchain. We're going to hold a blockchain summit at Kent Law School in Chicago. And we need speakers and moderators. I said, well, George, I moderated discussions on television. I hosted a weekly program in the late 90s covering the major issues before the United Nations on CNN. And he said, great. Well, ultimately, he assigned me to interview the attorney from the Securities and Exchange Commission who headed up their financial technology working group. He flew out from Washington. I interviewed him on stage. We had a tremendous turnout for that session and great feedback. So George asked me to put together a panel for the next conference called the CryptoCon, the cryptocurrency conference at Northwestern Law School. I brought together some business reporters to talk about how the news media reported on cryptocurrency and blockchain issues. And from there, George has asked me to do several other events. I've been asked now to speak and recently to moderate a panel discussion at the International Blockchain Congress, organized by another gentleman named George Ciccabani. And so I've become in demand. I'm asked to moderate lots of panel discussions, to do webinars and so forth. So I really did not know much about cryptocurrency or blockchain when I was invited to get into this. But the more I read, the more I saw the potential of blockchain and how it will transform so many aspects of our lives.
Well, and that's one of the things that, and that's actually how we met, was through George and David Carmen in Chicago. I've known those guys for quite some time. And I think that, I think your news background is actually what has given you the upper edge, because you were an investigative reporter. You had to investigate and understand things and learn in a very fast manner. So, I can relate to that because, I churn out a class like every week because, it's like I learn about it and I need to teach it so that it sort of forces me to wire in that part that where I can help other people. And so I think that's your benefit, because I meet a lot of blockchain people that have a tech background like myself, and I was in tech when there was punch cards. Now I'm dating myself, right?
Right.
So I remember at Merrill
Me
Lynch,
too.
raise of punch cards, and so, but that doesn't. I don't think that qualifies you for a changing technology. I think you're spot on where you have to be able to research fast, understand, apply it to a solution for a business. And you just seem naturally wired like that. Did you know that out of the gate, or was that just something that you stumbled in?
I had covered technology issues over the years, and I always felt my job as a news reporter was to learn as much as I could, as quickly as I could, about often complex and even confusing issues, and then distill that into a 2-minute television report or less. And so the challenge is to explain complex issues and try to cut through the jargon and explain it in a way that a general audience can. There were, back in the 80s, consultants and coaches in the TV news business said, aim for an 8th grade level audience. I didn't believe in that. I wanted to lift our audience up, and I felt on CNN we had a much more educated audience. But I also didn't want to talk over people's heads. And again, that's the job of the reporters, to take issues and distill them into tight packages that people can follow. And especially on television or radio, you're reporting to the ear. People don't have a chance to go back and reread a previous paragraph as they do with newspaper or magazine or now online. You have to present things in a way that the brain can absorb and follow through the ear. So that's what I feel is my strength in this new technology is, and I hope I did it somewhat effectively earlier, talking about Ebenezer Scrooge, is giving people those aha moments. Okay, now I get it. Now I understand what you're talking about. Because I find if I have to understand it first before I can explain it to other people. Right. So I experienced this in all facets of my reporting career, whether cutting through jargon, whether I was dealing with the police and doing a news conference where they talk about perpetrators, and they use all sorts of language that they wouldn't use when they go home and tell their spouse, oh, I got the bad guy today. And I couldn't boil it down to those kinds of phrases, but police, lawyers, doctors, engineers, on and on, all these professionals have their own jargon. And they often forget what it was like not to know that jargon. They can't go back in their own minds and say, oh, I need to explain this to civilians or lay people who haven't learned all that I know. And that was my job as a reporter, was to take information from experts and boil it down into a 2-minute report that people could understand. And so I enjoy moderating discussions now because I get to ask the questions. I usually have a conference call with my panelists beforehand so we can go over it, so I'm not throwing them curveballs, and that there will be a progression in the discussion. So again, the audience taking it through their ear can follow the discussion, because I find too often in panel discussions, the moderator will jump around from issue to issue, and it's hard for the audience to follow that, and you can see people getting bored and tuning out. So I try to give people a chance to understand the basics at the beginning and then go through a progression to get deeper and deeper, to drill down into the deeper issues.
Yeah, that's awesome. Our audience is most of them have been trained or coached by us, or have been exposed to what we call social teaming. You've attended some of our workshops and whatnot as well, and this is comes from my roots on the street of having trusted people around you it's collaborative. It means that we're all in this together, and they're there to help you. So in your transitions, are there a couple of people you'd like to just maybe give a shout out to that helped you and are still helping you maybe transition, as this fast changing technology has taken place?
Yes, I'd like to give a particular shout out to an attorney named Kate Curler, who I met at a business networking lunch in Logan Square in Chicago in, I think it was 2012. And of all the business cards I exchanged with people that day, the one person I'm still in contact with, and really probably the only person I followed up with that day, was Kate. And over time, we said, we really need to build up our LinkedIn profile connection, or our LinkedIn profile and our connections. I think I only had 5 connections in 2013 on LinkedIn. So we got a group together. We had a trust attorney. We had some people in the healthcare world. And we actually sat in a conference room and said, who can we contact? How can we start building this? I heartily endorse Social Jack and my friend Dean, because I have learned so much from you about how to write an effective profile. And it's just like having a strong lead sentence in a news report. You have to have a hook to grab people in. You have to have a middle, and then you have to have a clever closing, a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's like telling a little story or presenting a little movie. That's how I saw TV reporting. And that's what you do with social media. And you teach people how more effectively to reach out to the people they're trying to talk to. So from that group that I worked with in 2013, I went from having 5 contacts then to more than 3,300 now. Wow. But as you point out, it's not necessarily the number of contacts you have, but the quality of contacts that really matters.
Yeah, that's huge. So that's cool. And I think what I always admire about you is that you're always willing to learn the next thing and the next step. Mm-hmm. Technology sometimes isn't kind to us, and like I said, sometimes I'll sit there and get frustrated with my computer or software or even a platform. You log in and LinkedIn has this one day and they move it over here and they didn't tell anybody. And for our business, that makes it tough, but I always appreciate that you are willing to constantly learn and constantly connect to people. And you're a great connector too. And that's part of our, mantra here, is to help other people and be a net giver and make those introductions so that, what goes around comes around. And I just want to say that about you. And I've always admired you for that. So.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
And there were people who helped me along the way. It was a gentleman at my station in Tulsa, Oklahoma, who then was probably around the same age I am now, who came to me and said, hey, I have an old friend. We work together in Washington, D.C., but he's from Oklahoma. He's looking to fill a correspondent position at CNN in L.A. And again, I was only 24 at the time. I had been the weekend anchor at our station for only 6 months. But he had faith in me, and he had given me some good career advice about not jumping to another company until it was really worth it. And so I've had people who've helped me along the way, and I'm almost compulsive in wanting to help bright young people. And I sometimes will start in helping somebody who really doesn't show much appreciation or doesn't seem to understand or just has an inflated sense of themselves. And I will pretty quickly stop helping. I usually just let it go. I won't necessarily lecture them about that because I don't think it will help. But my wife and I have both mentored many people over the decades in television, news, and other areas. And I had lunch yesterday with a gentleman I just met a couple of weeks ago. He's in public relations. He started as a journalist, so we had that in common. And as he's telling me about some people in the PR industry, I immediately look them up on LinkedIn. I violate the rule that you're not supposed to be on your phone while you're talking to people, but I immediately hit connect to a person that he said is the best networker that he knows. And I later got a response from that person, and I immediately sent him a message. So I violate the rule that you should not connect to anybody that you don't know, or you should wait for an email introduction. It depends on the circumstance, but many times I will just invite somebody to connect and then follow up with the message. When they accept.
Well, that's our rule. It's like, well, if you're going to connect to people, don't just do a stream of unconscious connecting to grab people, but have the intent to have a conversation with them, and you practice that to the hilt. That's amazing.
I tried to do that, but I must admit I have connected with people, especially in the blockchain space, who I think might be useful to me at some point. I just want to have them in my list because I have found that LinkedIn is extremely helpful in searching for people. I cannot keep track of 3,300 names. Probably can't keep track of 30 names, but by entering somebody's profession or just entering blockchain, I come up with the whole list of my first connections. You can look at second and third connections, but I very often help people. I was out to dinner Saturday night, and one of my wife's former colleagues at the Fox station in Chicago says that her daughter, a sophomore at a college in Ohio, is in data analytics, majoring in data analytics. She was supposed to go on some sort of European study program this summer. It was postponed till next year. She's sort of scrambling for an internship. And I said, I've got friends in data analytics. I moderated a panel discussion in November on data security and made a bunch of friends in Chicago in that area. So I'm happy to connect her. So I need to write that email after we get off here. But so I'm very eager to help smart people. I think it's good for the world. And as I said to this gentleman I had lunch with yesterday, I don't think it's wise to keep score on making connections, to expect a one-on-one reciprocity. Things will come around, but I very seldom make a connection thinking that it's going to come back to benefit me in some way. Right. I just do it because I think it's good karma, and it's better for all of us to promote smart people.
Yeah, goodwill, absolutely. Well, at this point of the segment, as we wrap up, we ask people, what is the one takeaway? We always encourage our audience to say, well, you got to meet Brian Jenkins here, and what did you get from today's program? And what inspired you? And maybe you can use that to help somebody else, or maybe even help yourself. And we want you to share that with others. So we're going to bring Kate back on and see what she got out of the program today.
Okay.
And I want to wish your son Connor success as a contestant coming up on May 13th on the show The Bachelorette. So that's got to be interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I'll be watching like this through my fingers. So everybody tune in May 13th and see what happens. And
I will.
I can't provide any inside info at this point, but I'll be watching it along with everyone else.
As a nervous parent. So Kate, what did you get out of this interview with Brian?
Well, as somebody that, comes from a radio background, I just love his story. And I think a lot of people who are also in media will have similar stories, like me, for instance, of how they kind of fell into it. And so I love that. But my favorite part about it all was just where you are in your career and where you've been, and that you're still so eager to help other people. Like, you have such a giving heart. I knew that about you from when I first met you, and you're one of my favorite people to ever interact with. But it's just so nice because coming from like the younger perspective, it's like not many people out there are willing to help or give advice or mentor without receiving anything in return. And now, even advance in my career, I'm getting younger people asking me for advice. It's just, I know, when did that happen? I don't know. It's just interesting, it's just so lovely to hear that there's still people out there that will give advice without expecting anything in return. So I know I'm probably not the only person that's benefited from your advice. So I just want to thank you for that.
Yeah,
you're
cool.
More than welcome. And I started speaking to student groups within the first year coming out of college because I was a local TV personality. But I would say to people, don't be shy about meeting new people. Don't wait to follow up with them. I will sometimes, I'll meet people and I'll immediately go to LinkedIn, invite them to connect, because I know if I wait even an hour, I may forget about it. I'll say to myself, I'm going to do this while I'm on the train home. And then I get caught up doing other things. So don't put it off. Connect with people. You can always follow up with a message later. You do have to be somewhat discriminating. I get offers from all over the world every day from people wanting to connect in regard to cryptocurrency and blockchain. And if I don't know them or they don't have some mutual contact with me, I don't accept everybody because I'm concerned about security or people using my identity or my name to promote themselves. So I try to be discriminating about that. But it's amazing how quickly your contact network can mushroom, especially in one particular area. But my attitude is you can't teach old dogs new tricks. And when you stop learning, you might as well just hang it up. That's one of the things I loved most about reporting, was learning about new issues, new topics, and new technology. I am not the world's smartest technologist, but I love learning about it and, again, trying to explain it to people who are not experts.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian. It's just always a delight to talk with you and to
Thanks.
have you on. And everybody's chiming in here that they loved having you and listening to this. And don't forget that those of you that are live with us, don't forget you can grab the recording off of all the major podcast channels. And then we also invite you to join us on the Business Influencer Alliance Facebook group. A lot of you are in there chiming in right now. So we always appreciate extra comments and for you to participate. And remember, please, whatever you heard from Brian today that inspired you, please make sure that you share that with somebody else and keep passing that along, because you're all business influencers, and we just want to help make the world a better place by helping each other out. So Brian, from the bottom of our heart, we appreciate you, and I'm sure I'll see you at an event soon in Chicago when I get back. And
anytime. And shout out to the Mizzou Mafia, the ultimate networking group long before social media.
Yep.
The alumni of the University of Missouri School of Journalism. That's why I'm wearing the cap today.
Yeah, and being in St. Louis, they're down here somewhere, right?
Yes. There are lots of Mizzou alums there. And, we called it the Mizzou Mafia because there's so many journalism graduates out in the business at almost any TV, radio station, newspaper in the country. You could find somebody who was a Mizzou graduate, and that gave you a little bit of an in to get an interview at least.
There you go. All right, my man.
And then one last thing, we got to shout out Edith Bell, because she is our engagement winner on today's session. So she was asking a lot of questions and chiming in and saying how inspiring you were, Brian. So we're going to reward her with a Starbucks gift card. And our rule is that she has to take someone for coffee and teach them what she learned today. So congratulations, Edith.
And connect with me on LinkedIn, Edith.
There you go.
Brian Jenkins, blockchain.
Yeah, way to go, Brian. All right, everybody.
Okay.
Well, listen, we'll see you on the next episode. And Brian, we'll see you real soon when I get back to Chicago. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you online. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Influence Factory podcast. We welcome feedback and suggestions. You can provide these by visiting our website at www.myinfluencefactory.com. And if you are interested in Social Jack's 90 Days to Influence program, you can simply go to 90daystobusinessinfluence.com and simply ask for the next steps. While our program airs regularly on Zoom webcasts and Facebook Live on Wednesdays at noon Central, we invite you to download episodes on your favorite channel: YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and who knows where else in the future. We will also provide occasional on-location live streams with special guests that we will announce in our community Facebook group, Business Influencer Alliance, as well as on all Social Jack channels. Our mission is to help you build your digital business influence with this podcast, as well as inspire, educate, and entertain those who are hungry to collaborate in a cool place with cool business professionals just like you.